The $3.00 Amish solar setup that powers an entire homestead forever, and they built it in 2 hours. Your grid-tied system is doing something you don't realize it's doing right now. Every single day, it's failing silently. Not mechanically. The panels work fine, the wiring is safe, the inverter hums along. What's failing is the fundamental promise made to you when you signed up. And I'm going to show you what the Amish understood about this failure 200 years before anyone tried to sell you a $10,000 solution to fix it. Stay with me, because by the time this video ends, you'll know exactly why your neighbor's $2.00 system will never make him independent, and more importantly, why the people around Lancaster County figured out a way to power their entire lives without ever needing permission from a power company. If you've spent time thinking about going off-grid, or even just cutting your electric bill, you need to watch this. Leave a comment down below and tell me what's stopping you from making the switch right now. I'm genuinely curious what the biggest barrier is for you. Wait, this part is important, and I need you to focus for a second. A lot of people watch solar content and think they understand the whole picture. They don't. The complete breakdown of why modern residential solar fails and the exact mechanics of how the Amish approach solves it differently is covered in our full survival and homesteading guide. I've put together years of research into that resource. It's available in the description, and it's also pinned in the comments. That guide walks you through the principles that make this work, and it goes far deeper than any single video can. It's not free, but it's built for people who are genuinely ready to understand this instead of just watch it. Here's what happened. About 15 years ago, my neighbor, not Amish, works in town. He got approached by a solar company. They told him he could be energy independent. They showed him the numbers. In summer, his panels would make more power than he used. That surplus would flow to the grid. The power company would credit him. Then in winter, when his panels produced less, he'd pull from the grid and use those credits. On paper, it balanced out. $0 a year to the utility. Independence. Freedom. It made sense. The first winter bill came. Still owing them money. Not a little. Meaningful money. How? Because the power company wasn't crediting him at the same rate they were charging him. Summer electricity he generated, they bought from him at wholesale rates, maybe 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Winter electricity he pulled from the grid, they sold to him at retail, maybe 13 cents per kilowatt hour. He'd sold low, bought back high. The difference vanished into their profit margin. That's the system. That's how it's engineered to work. Most people don't realize this when they first hear about net metering. It sounds fair. You make it, you don't need it, the grid stores it for you, you use your own credits later. Elegant, balanced, completely false. What costs him the most, though, and this is what most solar companies never break down in the sales presentation, the $2.00 he paid wasn't mostly panels. Panels are maybe 30% of that. The rest is infrastructure built specifically to connect him to the grid. Inverters that can talk to power company equipment. Permitting, licensed electricians, disconnect switches, monitoring systems, financing. Every single one of those line items exists because the system has to negotiate with the utility. Remove the grid. Remove that requirement. Everything costs less. Everything simplifies. The Amish approach this completely differently. They never had the grid connection as an option, so they never built systems around that assumption. A single panel, a good battery, a charge controller. That's the foundation. 4 basic parts, almost no complexity, and crucially, no negotiation with anyone about where your electricity goes or when you get to use it. I visited a workshop in Holmes County last spring. Inside was basically what I'm describing. One solar panel, positioned against the south wall, where it catches sun from about 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. One lithium battery the size of a cooler sitting on a metal shelf. Basic wiring. The tools inside. A drill press, a bench grinder, some hand tools, all running off that setup. Owner's been using it for 8 years, never paid anyone to maintain it, never worried about efficiency rates or billing cycles. It just works. The question nobody asks is this: why does your house need to be connected to the grid at all? Most people assume the answer is, because I need power all the time. That's true if you treat your entire house as one single system. Lights, heating, cooling, refrigerator, garage door, water heater, everything pulling from the same source, all the time, equally. That's not how the Amish organize it. They separate loads. Some things run on solar. Some things run on different power sources. The solar handles the parts of your day that actually need solar, not the parts of your day where you've just gotten used to convenience. A workshop doesn't need solar at midnight. It needs it while someone's working. Lights, hand tools, maybe a compressor. 8 hours of solid use. Perfect match for what a small panel and battery can provide. Your refrigerator, though, that's running 24 hours a day whether you're home or not. That's not a solar job unless you want an enormous battery bank. And then you've rebuilt your neighbor's system, just smaller. The smart people don't try to solar power everything. They solar power the specific loads that make sense, and they keep grid power or backup generation for the rest. This is where the engineering actually gets interesting. Not because of the technology, because of what it reveals about how most people think about their homes. Most folks approach solar like they're buying insurance. They want full coverage. They want their entire lives backed up. So they buy the biggest system they can afford, and then they're shocked when the bill arrives anyway. The Amish approach is different. It's not insurance. It's efficiency. You don't insure against every risk. You eliminate the unnecessary ones first. That's why a single panel works on the chicken house. Hens don't need light at midnight. They need it in the morning. The panel charges the battery during the day. The battery runs lights in the early dark. When the sun sets, the hens sleep anyway. Simple alignment between what you need and when you need it. Same principle applies to your barn or workshop. Lights don't run at night if nobody's out there. A compressor runs maybe 3 hours a day when you're actively building or fixing something. A welder runs even less. These are daytime tasks. Solar is a daytime source. The match is exact. Now take the water pump. Before electric pumps, every farm had a hand pump. You pumped when you needed water. You carried it where it had to go. Then electricity came, and we built systems where water runs 24 hours to fill holding tanks, so it's there whenever you want it. Convenient, sure, but you're also paying every single hour for water you're not using. Amish farms often use a small solar panel with a battery to run an electric pump 2 or 3 hours a day, filling a cistern or tank. The tank holds pressure. You use the water. The pump turns off. The battery sits idle until tomorrow. Cost to set this up? Around $200. Cost per year to run it? Nothing. Here's the part that should concern you. The solar industry doesn't advertise this. They don't tell you that their most profitable margins come from selling you a system that requires a grid connection, permits, licensed electricians, and ongoing utility bills. A $200 setup in your barn doesn't generate commission. It doesn't create a dependent customer. It doesn't lock you into annual maintenance contracts, so nobody's incentive aligned to sell it to you. The grid-tied system on your neighbor's roof? Profitable. The panel on the barn? Essentially invisible to the industry. One generates recurring revenue, one doesn't. That's not a technological difference. It's a business model difference. Before we continue, I need you to keep something in mind. The specific mechanisms of how batteries charge, how panels degrade over time, how to calculate your actual load profile, how to size these systems properly, all of that requires understanding the deeper principles. I've put together a comprehensive guide that covers the technical foundation behind everything you're about to learn. It's available in the description and pinned in the top comment. That guide walks you through the calculations, the material lists, the timing strategies that make these setups work year after year. If you want to actually build one of these systems, not just understand the concept, that's where the real instructions live. Now, let's talk about the parts themselves. 4 components. Nothing exotic. Nothing that requires a contractor or a permit or a conversation with the power company. First, the panel. It doesn't have to be new. Used solar panels work fine. You're not grid-tied, so efficiency loss doesn't matter to you. A panel that's dropped in efficiency from 95% to 85% still charges your battery. A used 100-watt panel might run $50 to $80. A new one, maybe $120. The Amish buy whatever they find that works. Some panels came off commercial roofs. Some came from someone's failed grid-tied system. Doesn't matter. It still converts sunlight into electricity. Second, the battery. This is where people get it wrong. Most folks assume you need a giant lithium bank like a Tesla Powerwall. A Powerwall runs $10,000 to $15,000. You don't need it. You need a battery that stores enough charge for your actual load. If you're running workshop lights for 3 hours before dark, and those lights draw 5 amps, that's 15 amp hours of capacity you need. A basic lithium battery rated for 200 amp hours costs $300 to $500. For a simpler budget option, even lead-acid batteries work. They're cheaper and more forgiving than people think, though they do need maintenance. Third, the charge controller. This device sits between the panel and the battery and makes sure the panel doesn't overcharge the battery. Without it, you'd blow the battery in the sun. Costs $30 to $80. Simple electronics. Nothing fails on it usually. Fourth, the wiring and breakers. Heavy gauge cable so you don't lose power through the line. A simple breaker between the battery and the load so you can shut down the system safely. Maybe $40 of materials. Total for everything. $250 to $400 if you buy new. Maybe $150 if you scavenge used batteries and panels. One afternoon to wire it. No permits. No inspections. No utility company involved. And it works. The Amish aren't special because they're smarter. They're effective because they started from a different assumption. They assumed they wouldn't have grid power, so they never built their lives around expecting it. Most of us, though, we're wired differently. Most of us grew up expecting electricity to arrive at the wall whenever we needed it. That expectation shapes everything. It shapes how we design our homes. It shapes what tools we buy. It shapes what we think is possible. So when someone tells you that a panel and a battery can power your life, the first instinct is disbelief. You've been taught that real power, the kind that runs your whole house, requires a grid connection, requires permits, requires professionals, requires money. The Amish didn't get that memo, and frankly, that's their advantage. I spent time in Lancaster County last spring talking to families who've been running these simple setups for 15, 20 years. None of them talk about solar as a revolutionary thing. It's not. To them, it's just another tool, like a handsaw. You don't celebrate a handsaw for cutting wood. It does the job. It doesn't break. You use it. That perspective changes everything about how you approach the problem. When you stop thinking about solar as this big, dramatic energy independence statement and start thinking about it as a tool for a specific job, the whole picture becomes clearer. You don't try to power your whole house. You don't chase some fantasy of zero bills. You power the things that matter to you and the things that are actually worth powering with solar. The workshop lights, the well pump, the refrigerator that runs 4 hours a day instead of all day, the battery charger, the security light outside the barn. Before we continue, I need you to understand something important here. What I'm explaining to you, the actual mechanics of why these systems work, the real reasons they got abandoned, the patterns that explain why grid-tied solar became the only option pushed to homeowners, all of that lives in the complete survival and self-reliance guide that I've built, and it's waiting for you in the description below and pinned in the top comment. It's not free. It costs money. But inside that guide, you'll find the actual engineering choices, the historical decisions, and the financial traps that explain why your neighbor ended up paying $20,000 for something that doesn't actually work the way he was promised. If you're serious about understanding not just what to do but why the other way failed, get the guide. It's the deep version. The interesting part, the part nobody tells you in sales meetings, is that the technology isn't new. Solar cells were invented in 1954. Battery storage existed long before that. The charge controller, the inverter, the breakers, all of it was available by the 1970s. So why didn't this simple setup become the standard for regular people? Why did we instead end up with grid-tied systems that make utilities money and homeowners frustrated? The answer isn't technical, it's economic. When a utility company looks at a grid-tied solar system, they see something they can control. They see a way to shift the financial risk onto the homeowner. You buy the expensive equipment, you take out the loan, you pay the permits and the contractors, and then you feed them your summer electricity at a discount and buy back your winter electricity at full price. That's not a partnership. That's a transfer of capital from your roof to their balance sheet. They love it because there's no risk to them. The costs are yours. The profits are theirs. A simple off-grid system, a panel, a battery, a controller, a breaker, doesn't work that way. There's nothing to meter, nothing to connect, nothing to bill you for. You buy the equipment once, you install it once, and then for 20 years it just works. No utility company, no salesman, no financing company, nobody making money off you every single month. And so what happened, quietly, without any big announcement, was that the simple way got pushed aside. Not because it stopped working, not because something better came along, but because there was no revenue stream in it. And the grid-tied system, the expensive, complicated one, the one that ties you to the utility forever, That became the only option that got marketed. That got financing. That got installed by contractors with trucks and uniforms and permits that made it look official and necessary. Most homeowners never knew the other choice existed. The Amish figured this out decades ago. They didn't have the option to go grid-tied because the power company had already decided they weren't worth connecting. So they built for themselves. A panel here, a battery there. Equipment that cost what a used truck costs, not what a truck payment costs for 15 years. And it worked. Their lights stayed on, their tools ran, their water pumped. Season after season, decade after decade, with no bill, no contractor, no salesman showing up in spring asking if they wanted an upgrade. Now here is where this matters for you. Before we continue, I need you to lock in on something. The system I am describing, the one that works off-grid, the one that costs a fraction of what your neighbor paid, this is explained in full detail in my complete homesteading and energy independence guide. It covers the exact wiring, the load calculations, the battery sizing, the mounting, all of it. That guide is in the description below and pinned at the top of the comments. It is not free, but frankly, it costs less than the delivery fee on the grid-tied system. Get it if you want to build this yourself with confidence. Back to the setup. The reason this works is simple economics. A grid-tied system needs expensive equipment because it has to be safe to the power company. It has to be certified. It has to shut itself off if the grid goes down, because electricity flowing back into dead power lines can kill a lineman. That equipment costs money. The installation costs money. The permits cost money. The ongoing monitoring and compliance costs money. Every year somebody gets paid because you are tied to them. An off-grid system does not need any of that. Your battery does not care if it is certified. Your lights do not care if a lineman somewhere is safe. The power stays inside your barn or your workshop or your home. It never touches the utilities wires. So you skip every cost that exists only to make the system compatible with a centralized power grid. What you get instead is something that sounds boring but is actually radical. Reliability. The panel makes electricity in the day. The battery stores it. The wiring is simple enough that an Amish farmer who never finished 8th grade can understand it. Replace a wire if it breaks, add another panel if he needs more power. No phone call to a customer service line, no waiting for a technician, no software updates that break compatibility. Just equipment you own, installed once, doing the job it was built for. That is the secret that the solar industry does not want you to know. It is not the panels. Panels are fine. The secret is that you do not need to be connected to anything. You do not need permission. You do not need to buy a $3 0.000 system and then spend the next 20 years paying for the privilege of feeding power into their wires. You can build a system so cheap, so simple, and so durable that it pays for itself in months and then just keeps working. The equipment costs what it costs. The panel, the battery, the controller, the wiring. That is real money. $300, $400, sometimes more depending on what you want to run. But you buy it once. You install it yourself or with a friend, and then you own it. You do not rent it from a corporation disguised as a utility company. Think about that difference for a moment. Owning versus renting. That is the whole game. And it is why this way got pushed to the margins. Because a utility company makes money on the transaction. They make money on the monthly bill. They make money on the installation. They make money on the financing. Every single way you interact with them, they capture a percentage. But a simple off-grid system, they make nothing. This is why the Amish approach has quietly outlasted every trend in residential solar for 40 years. Not because they are simple people rejecting technology. They use solar constantly. The reason it has lasted is because they built it to work independently. No middleman, no monthly extraction, no salesman calling in 10 years asking if they want to refinance their panels. Just a system, just power, just independence earned through the simplest possible equipment. And that is available to anyone willing to understand how it works. Now I need to tell you the secret I promised at the very beginning. The reason your neighbor's system failed him while mine has run for years isn't about the panels themselves. Both systems use the same photovoltaic cells. Both convert sunlight into electricity the exact same way. The difference is what happens to that electricity next, and who profits from the path it takes. Grid-tied solar is not sold as a way to free you from the power company. It is sold as a way to reduce your bills. That is a different goal entirely. Reducing your bills means you stay connected. Staying connected means you stay dependent. And dependency is the entire business model. The secret they do not tell you is this: you do not need the grid to make solar work. You need the grid to make solar profitable for them. Those are two completely different things. When you own a battery and you own the system that charges it, something shifts. You stop thinking about your energy as a commodity to buy and sell. You start thinking about it as a resource you control. The moment that switch happens in your mind, the monthly bill stops mattering. The utilities price hikes stop mattering. Their net metering changes stop mattering. You have already left their system. That is what the Amish understood 40 years ago, and what most people are only starting to recognize now. An off-grid system does not make you wealthy. It makes you unbothered. That is worth more than wealth. Here is what I want you to do this week. Do not install solar panels tomorrow. Do not buy a battery yet. Instead, choose one electrical load in your home that frustrates you most. For some people, it is the garage lights that cost too much to run. For others, it is the outdoor shed or a workshop. For some, it is the well pump that runs on expensive electricity. Pick that one thing. Figure out how much power it actually uses. That number is hiding on the nameplate of whatever device runs it. Then ask yourself a single question. What would it look like if that one piece of equipment never cost me money to run again? That is the beginning. That is where every single Amish solar installation starts. Not with dreams of energy independence, not with anger at the utility company, just with one problem that has a solution standing in the sun, waiting to be wired. Everything else follows naturally from there. The confidence, the knowledge, the freedom that comes when you realize that some of the most basic functions of modern life do not actually require permission or a monthly check. You will not find this approach in solar magazines. You will not hear it from installers who need you to finance a $30,000 roof project. But you will find it on Amish farms across 3 states. You will find it in workshop and barns where people have been doing this for decades without fanfare. The most radical thing about this system is not that it is cheap, it is that it works so reliably that nobody talks about it. There is no status in owning equipment that simply solves a problem. There is only the quiet satisfaction of a problem solved. That is the inheritance of every generation before us. A problem, a tool, an afternoon of work, a system that runs for 40 years without asking for anything in return. Thank you for watching this far. If you found something useful here, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video. It helps us reach more people who are tired of paying for what they could own. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload, and I will see you in the next one.